Well, here we go again, folks. It's good morning, but it's also good afternoon because I'm talking to Joy Allcock, and she is in New Zealand, and right now it's morning. As a matter of fact, it's summer. Okay, and I'm speaking to you from the heart of Mid-America in St. Louis, Missouri. So for me, it's winter and it's afternoon. So good morning and good afternoon. Joy is an author, an educator, a researcher, and she has some really interesting and fantastic things going on. So I am just delighted that she's able to share some time with us. Um, and I'm about to stop talking and turn things over to Joy and start by asking her, well, tell us a little bit about your background, because it's a really impressive background. So please do. And here we go. It's all you.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you for asking me to join you. Well, I've been working in the literacy field since the mid-90s, but I came into it in a kind of unusual way because I trained as an occupational therapist originally. And I've worked with children in all sorts of different situations over many years. I think one of the things that sticks in my mind, I don't know, in New Zealand, we have this early childhood group of parents a group of parents who've got together and they run their own early childhood education for children, and it's called Play Centre. I don't know whether it's an international movement or not, but I was part of that, where parents are trained to run the early childhood education for their children. So I spent, several years doing that with my children. And then I was a mother help at school for a number of years. I was lucky enough to be a stay-at-home mum for about 14 years, actually, with my 4 children. And it struck me when I was working in classrooms that there were lots of children, including some of my own, who could read words really well. They couldn't spell them accurately. And I thought, that was like weird. Like, if you can read a word, why can't you spell it? So that led me to do a Master of Education degree. And my purpose was to find out really how you learn to spell, because I thought there's got to be a problem if lots of people are inaccurate spellers but perfectly accurate readers. So I started my Master of Education degree in the mid-90s and finished it in 2000. And since that time, I've written a number of resources really to try to, I discovered over that time that English has got a system. Written English has a system that most people don't even know about. And the more you know about it, the easier it is to spell words and read them. So I've written a lot of resources over that time to help teachers and students understand how written English works. And I've led a number of research projects from elementary to secondary level. So I've had a lot of opportunities to work with teachers, even though that wasn't my original background, and I've learned a lot from working with schools and teachers.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you the favor of, in our post-interview talk, that you send me the links to those resources that you think would be of most interest to elementary school teachers and middle school teachers, and we'll just line those up because we're always looking for things in that area. Okay. Now let's go on to the second question, which is this. Why do you think teaching foundational literacy skills before children start school is important? And help us understand the significance of early literacy and how it's crucial in your perspective, and just kind of shed some light on this very important point.
Okay, well, in around 2002, I led a literacy project in upper primary school. So it would be your grade 6 and 7 students and grade 8 and 9 students at secondary. And it was in a community, where most parents had 2 or 3 jobs, and they were very, not as well resourced as some other communities, a low socioeconomic area. And strangely enough, and it seems weird to me that children from those communities don't do so well at school, like globally. And because there's nothing wrong with their intelligence. You know, they've got the same capacity and potential as everybody else. And so my job was to raise the reading achievement for students in these two schools. And what we did first, we spent about 6 months trying to understand why they had reading difficulties. And what really struck me is that the majority of the students who had significant issues with reading and writing had no idea how English works. They had no idea how the alphabetic code works. If you asked a child if they were struggling with a word, to decode it, they would go through it one letter at a time, you know, pronouncing every letter, because that's what they'd been taught when they were 5, that A is an A for apple and B is a B for ball. And yet that's not how the code works, because A is an A for apple when it is, but the rest of the time it's something else. And we have to be able to read graphemes, not letters. And none of those students had ever learned that. So we made a huge difference in those schools really quickly. But what struck me is that those students needed to go back and be 5- and 6-year-olds learning this information. So they had all the time to put that into, you know, consolidate it, not starting when they were 13 or 14 to understand how English works. So I thought, well, I'm going to put my focus on building resources and working with teachers. I've done a lot of professional development with teachers in that early primary or elementary level. So that's where I've worked really mostly since that time. And then in 2014, well, in 2010, if I take a step back, a teacher from a local school rang me one day and she said, Joy, we've got to be doing something wrong with the way we teach writing, because we've got students with amazing language and we don't see it in their writing. So what are we doing wrong? So she asked me if I could go and work with her teachers in the first 3 years at school to see if we could pick up their writing. And over 3 years, we shifted student achievement in that school so that 30% more students were achieving for writing and reading at what national expectations than had been before. And that school has maintained that ever since. So I shared those results. It was just a kind of an action research study, really. I shared it with Professor James Chapman from Massey University, and he asked me what we did, and he said, do you think you could find some other schools so we could run a bigger, more robust study with trial and comparison schools? So within a week, I had 32 schools lined up to take part, because what I found is that every teacher goes to school to make a difference. Schools want their students to be successful. And if there's any possibility that they could do something that would work, that would improve things, you know, people are willing to participate. So over 2 years, we ran this research study, which made a significant difference across all socioeconomic communities, across ethnicities. We found we could level the playing field and improve the outcomes for students who'd started school without early literacy knowledge. But I wasn't really happy with that, because what struck me is that the students who started school with the most knowledge moved faster. So even though we could catch students up, you know, who didn't know anything about the alphabet, they had poor or no phonological awareness when they started school, we could get them to where their age-appropriate reading or writing levels, with, you know, in less than 2 years at school. But those who started earlier were still ahead of them. And so it seems to me that we have to keep taking a step backwards and improving where we start from. So I thought back to all the years, you know, when I'd been a mum helping out at Play Centre, and all that I'd learned about how children learn and how important play and interactive learning is for laying the foundations for everything, you know, maths, science, all the things you do at early childhood, pouring water, building blocks, digging holes in the sandpit, all of those things set you up for what you're going to learn later. And so I thought, well, what we looked at our research results, and we found correlations between what were the things that made the most difference when you started school with knowledge, particular areas of knowledge, what is likely to ensure you were reading well after a year. And we found that it was phonological and phonemic awareness, it was alphabet knowledge of being able to recognize the letters of the alphabet and link them to a sound. And they came out with the highest correlations, even higher than language, amazingly enough, because we know how critical general language skills are. So I wrote a series of resources which was aimed at early childhood, but is also used in kindergarten, because a lot of children come to school still without these skills. And it focuses on, the resources focus on building oral language skills, phonological awareness, alphabet knowledge, and linking letters and sounds, and helping students understand, or the young children understand, how letters represent sounds and words, and also looking at their knowledge of books, you know, how a book works, how words work. So I really wrote those because I believe that it is our job as educators to put the platform in place as early as possible. And the earlier you put it in place, the faster children move when they reach more sort of formal instruction. So I guess that was my motivation for developing this early childhood kindergarten series of resources.
Okay, and once again, I'm going to ask you to make sure to give us both the link to the research and to the resources as well, so we have an idea of what's going on.
Okay.
So what do you view now as the foundational skills for literacy?
Okay, well, oral language is the most important thing, even though I said that the correlations for literacy were you know, the highest ones were for phonological awareness and alphabet knowledge. Everything depends on our oral language skills. I mean, our comprehension, our ability to write, our ability to communicate. So we want children to develop a range of vocabulary, and because we know that vocabulary is only learned through experiences. You don't learn words in isolation. They come through experience. And so that experience can be something that you're doing, or it could be a book. A book can build your the background knowledge that you need for building vocabulary. And we want children to develop the language that they use for description. And once you can describe things, you can compare things. And once you can compare things, you can categorize things. So we're trying to build a sequential development of how to use language in our everyday life and in our classrooms in particular. And we also wanted to develop language organization skills, because a lot of students have got a lot of knowledge and they can't always access it. You know, if you asked somebody to tell you, say, all of the vegetables they could think of, they might sit there and say potatoes, and that's it. And we know that they've got lots of other vegetables, but they've got no strategy for linking to it. So if you said, what did you eat for dinner last night? Well, they might not have eaten any vegetables, of course, but, you know, being a child, but they might have said, oh, tomatoes or lettuce or something. Or you could say, do you know a green vegetable? So you give them a clue, green lettuce. What other green vegetables do you know? Then they might think of peas, and they might think of beans or whatever. So for some children, that's automatic to locate information, and for others it's not. And if we don't model it and provide strategies to build those skills, all of that information just stays sitting in their brain, unable to be accessed and used. So oral language is the most important. Building phonological awareness at early childhood level is about playing with sounds and words. It's got nothing to do with letters. This is all auditory. I often call it auditory gymnastics. You know, we're going to do our auditory gymnastics now, and we're going to do some rhyming, and we're going to collect syllables, and we're going to listen for a sound that might be the same sound in different words. And we're not necessarily going to do blending and segmenting, because that's a much more difficult skill that we only need once we start formally learning to read and write. But actually what I've found is that the more you play with sounds, the earlier children can learn those skills. And it's perfectly possible for kids to learn those skills before they go to school. I mean, all you've got to do is be in a classroom and say, I want someone to run a message for me. I mean, you know, it might be in the sandpit and you needed something, and you could say, there's someone in the sandpit and their name is Kate. Who's that? And the kids are all, oh, Kate. Okay, Kate. could you run off and get such and such for me? And that's what you're doing there, is you're teaching blending. But it's not formal. You're not sitting on the mat. You're not drumming this into it. You're just playing with sounds and words. We could do that easily. We can do that while the kids are on the swing or anywhere. Alphabet knowledge. You know, the names of the letters of the alphabet are no use to you when you're learning to read and write. They actually cause problems often, because we get kids who say, you know, W is a D sound, because why would it not be? It's the name of its letter. But we do need kids to be able to recognize letters and know that they are associated with sounds. And I might give you a little model in a minute of how I would run a sort of 2-minute lesson, if that would make sense, to show you what I mean.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Yes.
Okay. So we want children to know that they could name every letter of the alphabet and know a sound that they could represent. And if my name was so we might have a George in our classroom and a Gemma, and a Gordon and a Gemma. So Gordon might think that G is a G, and Gemma might think that G is a J, and they'd both be right, wouldn't they? We don't have to have just one letter, one sound, because letters represent lots of different sounds. So our children's names are the key to teaching the diversity of the code. And it's a really fun way of discovering the principles of how the code works without it being like overwhelming. And I will model that in a minute. And the other thing is, we want to read to children as much as possible. We want them to know how books work, that you read from left to right, from top to bottom, that these are illustrations and this is the text. So then they know how print works, that those black squiggles, if they are black on the page, represent the sounds that we are saying when someone's reading you a story. The storyline is in the text. And we want them to know how words work, that words are made of sounds, that my name has got 2 sounds. I'm a J and an Oi. And I could make a new word. If I swap my J for a B, who would I be then? I'd be a bit Oi. And I could swap my B and boy for it. And then I'd be a Oi and I'd be a toy. So that's how we teach these things, just through fun activities. And we want them to know that the letters and words represent sounds, sometimes on their own and sometimes with a partner or other partners. We could teach everything like this to children as young as 3. And I mean, this is definitely real, because I've done this, and I've had people who trialed our resources who just couldn't get over the difference it made. In fact, one of my colleagues, after she'd been doing this for 3 months, she rang me up one day and she said, I've just had, well, the equivalent of your kindergarten teacher, we call it new entrant level. The teacher from the school up the road has come down to our early childhood centre, and she said, what are you doing here? Your kids are the only ones who come to school ready to learn. They can all write their name. They've got great phonological awareness. They can recognise and name and give a sound for every letter of the alphabet. I mean, how did you do that? She said, well, I've only been doing it for 3 months. And so that's how easy it is to do. So maybe I'll just give you a little model of, will I do that now? Just.
Oh, sure. But before you do, I'm going to just chime in for a second and say, I've talked with other teachers and researchers who work with the youngest children. And I love a couple of things about what you've said already. Concerning how you turn it into play. It's not, you know, it's not, let's also do flashcards, not the least little bit. And I love that idea of learning to play with words. And if I ever show this to any of my teachers on this side, over here, I'm noticing that you are a master at how to say this, the sounds properly. So many of them add like "ta" and "ba," and you don't, and you didn't even think.
It took a bit of practice.
So you're a bit of a master teacher there for sure. That said, go ahead and model for us now, please.
Okay. So just, you could imagine, you could do this with your children on the mat, you know, in a classroom setting, or you could do this when you're sitting on the edge of the sand pit and they're all digging holes, and you could say, we're going to play a guessing game. I'm thinking of something that starts with "oh." It's an animal. Just going to get my clues here. This is like all of this is in the resource. I'm just going to make sure I get it to say the right things then. Okay, it's a baby animal. It has white wool. Its mother is a sheep. It says baa. Now, there's no way that children wouldn't guess that as lamb, but if they didn't, if you know, but everyone's looking blank, you could say, I'll give you a clue. It sounds like this. And if they still didn't get that, you can do onset and rhyme. Am. I mean, when you do onset and rhyme, you basically give the clue away. And so children will get that. 3-year-olds will get that. And they'll stop their digging for a minute and they'll say lamb. Say, oh, it is lamb. And you could say, guess what? In the sandpit today, we've got someone with a name that rhymes with lamb. Who is it? It's Sam. Sam's got a name that rhymes with Sam. Look, Sam-lam. Who can think of other words that rhyme with Sam and lamb? And we might have Pam and ham and jam. Okay, and then you could say, so our word lamb starts with the l sound. Has anyone else got a name that starts with l? We've got Lucas. And we've got Louise. And then you could say, there's someone here with a name that ends with l. Who's that? It's Paul. And guess what? There's someone here with the l sound inside their name. Sally has got the l sound inside her name. So we've got all these l sounds in our names at the start, at the end, and in the middle. And we could say, right, let's use our fingers in the sandpit and we'll learn how to write the letter L. And we'll just do a straight line. That's how we write the lowercase l. And if we wanted to do it at the start of Lucas or Louise's name, we would do it like this, and you just demonstrate the uppercase L. And so you've got, let's clap the syllables in our names now. So we've got Sam has got 1 clap. We've got Lamb has got 1 clap. Louise, how many claps in Louise? How many claps in Lucas? How many claps in Sally? So what you've done in that little tiny moment when they're still digging away in the sandpit is you've taught language organisation skills when you were helping them by giving them clues to go searching through their brains for everything they know about animals, baby animals, animals with wool, and until they fine-tune it down to it being a lamb. You've taught rhyming, you've taught clapping syllables, you've taught initial sounds, medial sounds, final sounds. You've shown them how to blend sounds together. You've taught letter recognition and letter formation. All that in no time at all. And I remember asking an early childhood teacher, friend of mine, would she trial this guessing game thing, which I used to play these in the car with my grandchildren a lot. We used to say, I'm thinking of an animal, and you had to guess what it was. And she thought that maybe it was going to be a bit hard for their kids. So she did this one day in the sandpit. She said the most amazing thing is that the 3-year-olds, they all got it. Not only that, they're then saying, let me have a turn. And here are these little wee kids making up their own clues to let their friends guess what they were thinking of. So it's like, it's a way of thinking. Teaching these skills is a way of thinking. It's not a program. But I know that sometimes teachers need resources that get them into that way of thinking, if that makes sense. So everything that I've written is about an approach to learning. It may look like a program, but really it's an approach. And to me, the success of a program, of a resource that you've given that looks like a program, is when the teacher says, I don't need the book anymore. It's how I think. And I've had so many teachers say that to me over the years. Look, I don't need to use that now. I used to sit there with it on my knee and follow everything, word for word. And then I thought, is that all it is? It's a shift in teacher thinking. And now I can do it anywhere and any time. And sometimes I might go back to look something up, but most of the time I've now got, it's just the way I think. You can do these things anywhere.
And you've pretty well covered my next question. And as a matter of fact, I did a little screen shift so that I know that you did, which is why have you written these resources? And I think you also answered the question of how to use them in terms of, and I really love your point about changing teacher thinking. So I think you fairly well answered question 4, but just in case, Anything else you might want to say about why you've written these teaching resources and how teachers should use them?
Okay, so I'm just going to mention one resource. I'll just show you this book here, Elevate and Evaluate. When I ran the Shine Literacy Project, this one between 2014 and 16, I ran professional development sessions for teachers over that time. And in fact, we had such a great team of schools working together. When that project finished, nobody wanted to stop. So we actually carried on working for the next 4 years. Most of the schools stayed together. We raised about $500,000 to support that. It was a community-funded research project, and people, because it had been successful, we raised money to continue to resource schools and provide the professional development so that they could get free training. You know, we could pay for their teacher release and everything. But at the end of every year, we had meetings with the principals and the lead teachers about planning the PLD for the next year. And every time people would say, oh, we've got new teachers in our school now, and they don't know what we learned. So could you do this again? You know, go over the same thing. So what's in this book is basically what I found teachers wanted to know that they didn't know. It's just stuff that they were never taught, and they wanted to know. They wanted to know how to teach vowels. You know, how do you teach vowels? Are the trickiest things. What's the difference between a blend and a digraph? How can I teach a child to decode any book? You know, so there's a whole section in there on how to teach decoding using any book, because decoding is a way of thinking. It's not a book. It's not a decodable reader. It's knowledge of the code and how you apply it. So this book contains all that information that I knew teachers wanted, plus a whole series of assessments to find out what your students already know and where there are gaps, so that your instruction is targeting, you know, what needs to be taught. We don't want to be teaching stuff that kids know, and we don't want to teach things that is beyond our students. So that's probably, I guess, I really love working with teachers. You know, professional development has been probably the thing I like the most of all of it. And I felt, somebody once said to me, I wish I knew what was in your head. I just want to know that for a day. And I thought, well, I'll put it in a book, so that what I've learned over all these years through working so closely with teachers, and as I'll put it in a book, and then people can use it whenever they want to.
Okay, and one of my upcoming themes for the new year is empowering teachers and
Yep.
giving them the knowledge that they need. And you certainly sound like you have developed and are developing resources to do that. And now for our last question, what message might you have to pre-K teachers about teaching foundational skills? And and any more that you want to say about the research advice and guidance for pre-K teachers, and just how can they get to think like you? And there's a soundbite in there, and now my poor brain is trying to remember exactly how you said it, but it was a rather masterful thing that you said, that you have to basically, it's not about a program, it's about learning how the code works. And once you understand how the code works, then you can help others to do the same. And you said it better than I did just then. But so your message to pre-K teachers and other teachers as well.
Well, I would say that if you're a pre-K, teacher or a kindergarten teacher, you hold the key to leveling the playing field for all those children who maybe come from homes with really busy parents, who are working 2 or 3 jobs just to feed their children, and they may not have the time to put into the development that we would hope children have. And it's so they come to your education setting, and you can make the difference. And it is, as I said before, it's not about programs. It's not about whether you use this program or that program or whatever. It's about what you know as a teacher that these children need to learn, and understand that there are ways that you could teach this, so that when they move into more formal learning, they've got all those understandings and foundations in place. And, it can be fun. It is fun. There's no need for it not to be fun. We have the same we have an expectation that we can teach the maths and science foundations through play. Why don't we do the same for literacy? You know, it's not about print. Literacy is not about print. It's about an understanding about oral language, the way that words work, which is the phonological awareness, and how letters are used to represent them. That's what we need to be teaching. And you can make it easy and fun. And once you've changed your way of thinking, it's as easy as just that. You don't need anything.
Okay, I'm going to do a little surprise for you here.
Oh.
And I'm putting up the website where people, and just anything you might, but before we leave, I did some, well, gosh, who's done the videos, I wonder, and the webinars and all the rest. So if anything you want to say to folks about this website, if you were a teacher just kind of browsing this, where would you go?
Well, if you were looking at resources, you could go in there and then scroll through and find something that would be appropriate for your year level. For example, Key Foundations is the one I've just been talking about. If you go down a bit further, but where is it?
Oh,
Oh,
there, right there.
Key Foundations. So if you click on that, there's a lot of things you can download. There's samples of all of these different things are available for downloading. Some of the things are still being written, you know, and developed, but we've got catch-up resources for older students who've got gaps in their code knowledge. I've written a number of, so I mean, you could just browse through the resources and it will take you, if you are from the US, it'll take you to, I think we have a US publisher, Hatch Early Learning, and so it will take you to their site. I'm pretty sure it does. I've written some articles that some people have found a bit confronting, should I say, but useful, you know, what's the problem with systematic instruction? Well, there isn't one, of course, but that did cause a bit of a flurry at times where people thought I was being critical of structured literacy. But, you know, I've been working with the research, the science of reading research, that was out when I did my master's in the 90s. It's not new. And that's what has informed all of the work that I've done ever since. And I've used the structured approach because that's what works for students. So these articles might be of interest to people. There is, I'm just trying to think whether we're building a series of video PLD, you know, webinars, putting up there that rather than, because I can't keep doing PLD all the time. And so we're making webinars and there'll be a lot more of those going up in the near future.
Okay, so certainly a lot for people to have a look at. And now at this point, I usually say, did we leave anything out? Here's your last chance to say whatever you like about whatever you like, or have we pretty well covered what you were hoping to cover?
I think we've pretty well covered it. I really appreciate the opportunity to share what I've been doing with you. And yeah, I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Okay, well, we're grateful for the work you've done and picking your brain and hopefully maybe recreating a little part of your brain in our brains to help us understand the code as well. So yeah. That all said, there's one final silly tradition, not so silly, on a Bomarito interview. And what we do now is, in just a moment, we smile and we do a Zoom wave goodbye. So let's say goodbye to our viewers and thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you, Sam.